Phoenix, 1962. And in this spot were a group of houses back then. This story is about something that happened in one of those houses that stood right in this very spot. And this is not the actual photo of the house, but I'm using this photo that I took just for the purpose of telling the story. Back in 1962, a 33-year-old woman lived here, and her name was Frances Hyatt. She lived with her young son. She was married, but her husband left the two of them about 10 years prior. Frances worked as a bookkeeper. This is Charles Stevens. He's 42 years old. He and Frances met when she worked for him as a bookkeeper 10 years previously at an oil drilling equipment firm in New Orleans. 5 years later, she followed him to Los Angeles when he moved to LA. And he eventually moved to Scottsdale, and a couple years later, she would follow, but she got a place in Phoenix. She and Stevens would get together, take trips, and so on. Now, Stevens was married, and he had 2 children. Frances grew up in New Mexico, and she always kept in contact with her childhood sweetheart, Richard Walters. In 1962, Walters lived in Tucson, was married with 2 children, and was a foreman for Mountain States Telephone and Telegraph Company. She had a relationship with Walters when she was younger, but they remained very good friends and saw each other occasionally over the years. And she would describe him to police as somebody who was the life of the party, always looking for a good time, fun to be around. In early 1962, Walters contacted Frances and told her that he'd be in town to attend a telephone company school in August of that year. Frances agreed that they would get together. On the evening of August 16th, 1962, Frances, Walter, and 2 of his co-workers were at Frances's home for a get-together. While one of the co-workers was showing Frances, again, this is 1962, but it was showing her how to do the twist. Stevens showed up. Now, this was a normal habit, but it made things a little bit awkward. Frances would later tell the police, quote, "He started to raise a rumpus then. I told him I couldn't see anything wrong with what I was doing. He saw red anyway." Not long after Walters' friend left the house, Stevens and Walters remained. An argument began between the 2 men because Walters wanted to stay and Stevens wanted him to leave. Stevens went into the bedroom and retrieved a shotgun. He went back into the living room where Walters was standing. When he saw Stevens with the shotgun, Walters said, "Go ahead and pull the trigger." Stevens didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. He fired the shotgun, hitting Walters in the head, killing him instantly. Frances, frantic, ran out the door and ran next door, and police were called. Stevens calmly sat in a chair in the living room. Police arrived to a hysterical Frances Hyatt. Seeing Walter dead and Stevens sitting in a chair holding a shotgun, the patrolman tried to calm Frances down, and he grabbed her by the shoulders and got her up and outside the front door. As he did this, a shotgun blast rang out. The officer ran back inside to find Stevens had put the shotgun to his head and fired, killing himself. Afterwards, Frances said, "What else is there to say? It's all so senseless. The death of these 2 wonderful persons. They both were good men." She explained everything to police and told them that Stevens was her boyfriend of 10 years, even though he was married. Stevens' wife, about a week prior, took out a missing persons report, and Frances told the police that she knew exactly where he was with her. Charles Stevens, who was an Army vet, is buried at Memorial Park Cemetery in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Richard Walters, a Navy vet, is buried at the South Lawn Memorial Cemetery in Tucson, Arizona. What a horrible thing that happened. 2 lives that did not need to end. 2 men who served their country then a murder-suicide over jealousy. Frances admitted to police that though he was married, Stevens was her boyfriend of 10 years. Even his wife knew about it. But he also knew that she enjoyed hanging out and seeing her childhood sweetheart, Walters. You add alcohol to the mix. Just tragic. And sadly, Walters lost his brother at Pearl Harbor. No other information was available as to what ended up happening with Frances Hyatt. But another story, another tale, another tragic tale that occurred on this street, at this spot, in 1962.